U.S. Foods proudly presents Offset with Kinger and the Big Man, Jay Caulfield.
Yep.
I'm Rob King. He's the big man, by the way, in case you were wondering. We're joined by Kevin Colbert for part 2 of our interview. Thanks very much for being with us. Kevin, we really enjoyed part 1, and we got you right up to the point in which you then came back to work for your hometown team. So what happened? How did you wind up going from Detroit to the Steelers? And just sort of emotionally, what was that like? That had to be really cool.
It was. I mean, they had an opening. Back then it was called Director of Football Operations when I first got here. And they had an opening, and, you know, they reached out to the Lions personnel and asked if they could interview me because I was under contract, and you have to do that within the rules of the league. And, you know, I came in for an interview and then came back for a second interview and was fortunate enough to get hired.
Could you have accomplished that or even gone down that path if you didn't do the mix between college and then how you got into the pro side in Detroit? Like, if you didn't get the taste of working with the player that's in the league at that time, as you mentioned before in the previous show, it's one thing about college players, but meeting the professional athlete, the guy that's in the NFL, how much did that feel like that puts you on the, you know, in the limelight, if you will, to be able to get this, a new position like that?
I think it helped tremendously because I did have the college background and then the pro background. And then I had done, you know, in 1992, the salary cap world came into existence. And I grew up learning the cap. I wasn't a capologist, but I had to work within the rules as that expanded. So I was able to touch on all three. And I think that probably helped. But Mr. Rooney always, when I got hired, they asked Mr. Rooney, did the fact that Kevin went to North Catholic help? He goes, it didn't hurt.
I love that.
So it always struck me as extremely collaborative. Yourself, Bill Cowher, Dan Rooney, scouts, everybody. That the Steelers is a kind of a check your ego at the door kind of organization from the outside looking in. Is that accurate, do you think?
Yeah, very accurate. Again, they have one goal. It's very simplistic. We want to win a National Football League championship, period. And we're going to try to do it this way. It's not that you don't have ideas that you can bring from the outside, but you quickly understand that, look, they've been successful. Okay, they had a little turn where they, you know, created an opening. They wanted to find that success again. So sure, they want some different ideas, but those ideas are always going to be under the understanding that we've been successful. We want to get back there. What else can we do? But in the meantime, we're probably going to do it this way. So you accept that when you come in and you grow with it and appreciate it, because that consistency from them is always there. When I say them, the Rooney family, they understand. The chief understood it. Mr. Dan Rooney understands it. Art Rooney now, who's our president, understands, look, you're going to have a lull in a given season in a given era. We can't have too many lulls, but they understand the expectation of themselves and also the people working for them. Accept that.
You know, you're going to an elite franchise where we know you grew up in the area, you know what that was all about, but you're coming to a franchise because all teams, what in the beginning of the year, we have our goals to win the Super Bowl. And you and I know, and Rob, we all know, well, probably 75% of those teams have no shot whatsoever, right? You're coming to a team, an organization, and you're kind of just, you alluded to it already, but in a sense, that pressure's there to know you're going there, and what we just mentioned, the words that everybody says that our goal is to win the Super Bowl, it's real when you came to the Steelers. That's something that's understood when you walk in the door.
Yeah, I mean, it was real. Like with Miami, it was my second year there. We lost in the AFC Championship to the New England Patriots, believe it or not. And then the Redskins back then, I'm sorry, it wasn't the Redskins. The Patriots played the Chicago Bears, who the Dolphins had beaten, the only team that had beaten the 85 Bears. Yeah. So anyway, we lost that. In Detroit, my second year, we lost in the NFC Championship game to the Washington Redskins. So, and we were in the playoffs, but we were never as close as, we were in Pittsburgh. So,
But you still had that taste all the time. I mean, the taste was there too.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Then when you get to Pittsburgh and again, back then we had 4 trophies, and you walk in and you understand, hey, they've been there.
Yeah.
This is what they're expecting. And then when you're able to help get another one, nothing else matters after that.
Yeah.
Because just because you did it once, and Joe Green would remind, Joe was on our staff as a scout after coaching. He said, okay, you won, that's good. He said, you want to be great, do it again.
Yeah.
So that expectation never goes away.
Yeah.
What was your first year with the Steelers?
2000.
That's right. That's what I thought. So that was my first year in Pittsburgh. And look, the team had gone through a little down trough, which is usually what happens when jobs become available, right? One of the things that always impressed me during your tenure, and which I think the Steelers are still trying to do today, is that you always seemed to build a team leading up to the draft that could play. So, they always talk about best player available. That's difficult to do. But it always felt like you positioned the team to go into a draft and say, best player available at several different positions. So you didn't feel the need to reach. Was that a philosophy of yours to be able to get yourself available to pick 3 or 4 different guys in a given year, or 3 or 4 different positions, so you didn't feel like you were reaching?
Yeah, I mean, overall, it's a hard thing to balance. We want to win now. I mean, we want to compete for a Super Bowl each and every year, but we never lost sight, or tried never to lose sight of the future. So we never would mortgage draft picks or whatever just to win in a given season. Our challenge was we're going to win now, but we're never going to lose sight of what's down the road. So we tried to go into that understanding short-term goals, long-term interest, and keeping those together. The only losing season we had, that we were fortunate because there was 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks available.
Right.
Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, and Ben Roethlisberger, all 3 will end up in the Hall of Fame, and we were fortunate enough to get one. So that helped tremendously for the time that I was there. So you try to build and, keep that flow going. And it's not easy, but you never want to lose sight of the short-term goal. Never. And you want to continually build for that next team.
If you had on the draft board, if you had on the draft
please.
board, you're looking and, we really want a linebacker, we want a lineman, whatever, offensive side. But when your number comes up, or it's your turn to pick, but there's an elite talent that's still on the board, still out there available. Would you stray from what you were initially thinking about if some player was, maybe just an elite talent that you think could be a benefit, even though it's off, not what was in your picture initially? Does that ever come up a lot of times, or a number of times throughout the draft?
Yeah, and I can give you real specific examples. Again, when we had Ben and he was in his peak career, we're not going to take a quarterback that high, even though they're going to be great players as well. In the draft, when we took Antonio Brown, we had drafted Emmanuel Sanders in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
And we had Emmanuel and Antonio graded really close. Emmanuel was a senior. He had played in the East-West game. He was a little more ready-made, whereas AB was, a junior coming out early. He was going to take a little bit longer than Emmanuel. So I said, we'll take Emmanuel. But then when we got to the 6th round and Antonio was still available, we said, guys, it doesn't matter if we took Emmanuel. And Emmanuel played 11 years. But this kid could be special. We better take AB, and that's why we took AB. So I think that gives you an idea.
Yeah.
Yes, at a certain point, you have to consider the elite talent.
Awesome.
I remember you saying that it's your job to have to hit on the 1st round picks, right? So there's a lot of pressure on that, obviously. But I think that, most teams, fans put together these mock drafts now, and the experts, and most of those guys are taken in the 1st round. Certainly not all of them. We saw that with Shedeur Sanders this year. Yeah. But you have a pretty good idea of what's going on. Do you get a special sense of enjoyment or thrill in getting, whether it's Clark Hagen's or Larry Foote or Antonio Brown or, Brett Kiesel or a player like that a little later in the draft, a real quote unquote find who winds up being a great player? Does that give you a little extra thrill?
And I don't think it's much of a thrill. We were just trying to do what we're supposed to be doing and identifying talent throughout the draft and in free agency. You mentioned Brett Kiesel, Kelvin Beachum, who's still playing.
Yeah.
We had 3 7th-round picks that year, and Beach was our third. We always called him 3 or 7C. You know what I mean? But he's still playing. But you don't take, you're proud of it, but you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing. And, sometimes I'd have to remind the scouts, we'd be beating our chest over a free agent like a Willie Parker or James Harris.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Well, they made the team, and they obviously were great players, but I would always try to say, hey, guys, if we knew they were that great, we should have drafted. And
there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that.
And I don't want to take anything away from what a Willie Parker did or what a James Harris did to make their careers what they were. But that's our job.
It's so funny. I remember Albert Pujols, he went and he said, I want to get back at all the teams that didn't draft me. I said, well, the Cardinals didn't draft you 10 times. You went in the 11th round, and if you could redo that draft, you'd go 1-1, no question about it. And still, there's got to be, there's got to be, when you're in your car driving, if I was at a stoplight, I'd be like, oh, Antonio Brown, 6th round. Yeah, that was a pretty good pick. Okay, there's got to be some joy, no?
Really, honestly, you don't think about it when you're working it. Someday you may
look back on it.
Yeah, look back and say, oh, he was really good.
It's pretty good.
But you don't, when you're in the moment, you're just focusing on what's next. You got to do it again.
Well, we text me, someday came, and I allowed myself to enjoy that. We just shoot me a text. So
when that happens, let us know.
When that happens.
We'll have you back on, Kevin. We'll have you back on and tell us about that feeling. I was going to ask you, with all the, it's the Sanders thing, right? From your years when you first GM and you're in the draft, how different did it change up until the year, when you get out? But did you see a change, like dealing with agents to parents to whatever's going on in the world today, like that a guy can literally, you talked about it. You talked about your feeling of when you see a guy, does he fit into the locker room? To stumble, there's a lot of things that go on, and we saw the talk back and forth. But how different was it from when your first drafts to your last?
The media coverage obviously intensified and grew, and it's great for the game, the draft. I mean, you look back on some of the old draft shows and you're like, wow, that was really primitive. They used to write the name and run up and give it to the table. So the media coverage has changed dramatically. And what's really part of this whole change too is that player you're getting is probably coming from a compensated background in today's NIL world. And so they're coming in with a different mindset sometimes. And sometimes they might be taking a pay cut to go to the professional level.
Incredible.
And good for them. And that's beautiful. But it's real. So those challenges they're real.
Let's say I missed one thing about, I can't wait for the draft to be here in Pittsburgh. But after that, seeing it in New York was always entertaining whenever the Jets and Giants made their pick. Even
booing for Phil Simms. I remember that.
Nonstop, right? In downtown, in New York City, how different it was. Like you said, how it's changed so much. But good to hear that.
You also mentioned the media attention. I want to get back to the draft, some of the nuts and bolts of it. But, I'm always amused every year. They show the war room. And listen, I understand these guys have worked not just for years probably to draft some of these players. They've been scouting them forever. But no matter who is selected, everybody in the war room jumps up and shakes hands. This guy, he may not be in a league in 3 years, but every pick is a celebration. And what is the war room like on a draft day? Is there conversation going on? Is there a last minute scout pleading for his guy, or do you pretty much have your board? I mean, calls are coming in, right? Hey, do you want to trade up? Do you want to trade down? Right. Is it chaotic? Is it fun? Is it stressful?
The actual day of the draft, when I was working it, no, it's very calm because you've done all the work. The 3.5 weeks of the intense meetings after the fall scouting, the winter scouting, the pro days, the bowl games, the interaction with the players. I mean, we'd sit for a good 3.5 weeks and sort out that information. And any discussions, you can call them arguments, but most of the time it wasn't an argument. It was just a respectful collaborative opinion, and we had to come up with one opinion. Over that time, mock drafts, after about 7 years, we said, these are a waste of time because I don't really know what Philly's thinking or what Washington's thinking. And for us to try to make a guess, it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
So what we did is we said, okay, if we're picking 20th, all right, we got our board set. We're picking first. Who we taking? Okay, that player's gone. We're picking second. Who we taking? And we'd do it all the way down to 20. So the order that there's going to be 20 guys available. We know that. And this is the order we take them. The only decision you want to make is whether you trade up or trade down. And you have discussions ahead of time what it would cost to move up or what you may get if you trade down. So it's really calm after day one. You know, again, old days, it used to be 12 rounds in one day. Now it's 7 rounds over 3 days. So, but after round 1, you do the same process for rounds 2 and 3. And it gets a little wider when you get into that last stage,
Sure.
4 through 7.
Is it ever, so for all the people that do fantasy football and stuff, and you realize that Christian McCaffrey's still on the board and you're like,
Right.
So that's kind of like, was there ever moments like that in the draft room, like where you go, hey man, the guy's still here, or they didn't take him? And then we talked about adjusting, but you've also covered the back end. Like if this guy's gone and this guy, you're 1 or 2, maybe 3 players deep in case somebody's off the board right away. But that's your moments of maybe exhilaration where you go, hey, we still got him, or he's still there, kind of thing.
Yeah, and you're constantly looking at, okay, we're 8 picks away.
Yeah.
We got 5 guys we'd be happy with. And most of the time, I mean, we have percentages on who's going to make it. And we go into a draft, there's 125 guys. We're going to get all 7 guys from. We knew it.
Yeah.
Just not because we were right, but just because of the way we had them rated. We were going to get our 7 picks out of those 125. So for a given pick, we'd sit there, you know, and sometimes a coach, either Coach Kyle or Coach Tom would be looking at me and I'd say, relax, we're good. We have a real good chance that this player's going to get to us. And again, you play the odds a little bit when you trade back. You got to be careful that if you trade back 3 spots, you should have 3 players.
Right. Yeah.
So you're willing to
That's
take. I
yeah.
mean, you know, we did that with Casey Hampton. We traded back and we were still able to get Hampton. We would have taken him where we had him graded.
So there's a little bit of a card game going on, a little bit of a poker game going on.
Sure. And
Yeah.
teams are calling saying, hey, we're interested in moving up. And you look at it now, there's draft value charts. Again, that's that analytics side.
Right.
I don't value that because when we traded up to get Troy Polamalu, we gave up a 3rd and a 6th. And we went from, I think it was 27 to wherever Troy was, 12 or so.
Yeah, I think it's 12.
And then
I
a
think.
few years later, we went from, I think, 32 to, or I'm sorry, 30 to get Santonio. We gave up a 3 and a 4, and we only moved up 3 spots. And people were like, why did you gave up a 3 and a 4? I said, you want us to give the trophy back? I mean,
Yeah, right.
that one worked out. It doesn't really, look, if you can get every year it varies. So the amount that you're willing to give up in a given draft, you have to be flexible and you can't be locked into any charts.
I would think number one, your demeanor has to be the way, very calm. As long as I've known you, you've had the same demeanor and personality about things, but your preparation to the nth degree, like you're prepared. If you were maybe somebody in a role like that and not really didn't do all your due diligence with your scouting staff, all that, but your preparation even built your confidence even more, that you felt very comfortable with what was out there, what players you had on your list, but your demeanor, like for you to look at Bill Cowher and say, oh, relax, guys, it'll be all right. That's, to me, that shows that you're prepared, you understand what's out there, and you're calm about it, which you kind of need to be in that position.
Yeah, and again, it's an exchange, and sometimes the coach may have to settle me down as well. I mean, it's not from a jumping up and doing anything, but sometimes, hey, are we sure we're good with this? Yes. Remember, we talked through this, and over time, when you see it, and they feel better over time when it comes through. Like we said, we're going to get this player. Did we lose a couple? Sure. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't a panic because sometimes we always say, like in free agency, some of the best deals we did are the ones we didn't do.
Right.
Or some of the best picks we made are a result of not making another one. And that's happened in both cases.
You know, one of the things that, again, it just seemed like the strategy to be able to have a board in which you could go in a couple of different directions, didn't have to draft for need, seemed to me to be one of the other things that I just admired so much was, you know, everybody, you think about building a team, right? And you want a quarterback, and you want a left tackle, and you want a pass rusher, and you want a shutdown corner, right? Maybe a number one receiver. There's certain elite positions you want. Well, if you're drafting in the 20s all the time, a lot of those guys are gone. So you have a choice. You can draft the fourth best left tackle. This is, again, for me on the outside looking in, projecting what I think you were thinking. You can either get the fourth best left tackle, or you can get Marquise Pouncey, or you can get David DeCastro, a great player. And to me, great players always make other players around them better. So if you're Marquise Pouncey, if you're the left guard next to Marquise Pouncey, your job might be a little bit easier because of his greatness. He might be able to get around the edge and do certain things with him. Was that part of your philosophy to draft a great player instead of saying, let's get the fourth best offensive tackle, let's get a great player almost regardless of position?
I mean, you wanted always to be able to draft someone you felt very comfortable in taking. In a given draft, just like we were talking about in a given trade, there may be a certain number at a position. Like in recent years, there's been a lot of offensive tackles. Back when, you know, in the mid-2000s, that always wasn't the case. I think the game has changed. The college game has changed. It's more of a passing, edge rush type of thing. Whereas back in the day, that left tackle, they were premium. But in a given draft, you may have, hey guys, there's only 3 left tackles. In another draft, there may be 7 that you say are quality starters. So does that increase the value of those other ones? It can. But you got to be careful and not just give them a certain value only because there's 3 of them. You give them that value because you want them. You know, I never would let them use the word need, because when you say need, you don't evaluate properly, because you're going to overlook, well, his feet aren't real good, or he's dropped a few balls. When you say want, and you take that player because you want him, I think you're better off.
Interesting. Great stuff. What's it like winning a Super Bowl? Putting the work in and getting close, and then winning one, and then winning another one too, by the way.
It was special. I tell people all the time, because I had lost in championship games, both in Miami and in Detroit. When we beat Denver to get to the Super Bowl, I mean, I was bawling like a baby. And Dick Hoke, our great running back coach, looked at me, because Dick had been there 4 times, and he goes, "You all right?" And I said, "Yeah, coach, it's just real emotional." But when you win a championship, you know this, Jay, the one thing you think about that can never, ever be taken away from you. And that's something that I just remember going through the locker room in Detroit when we won that first one, just hugging the guys and said, "Hey, this can never be taken away from you."
Yeah.
And it's special. It's special.
So you've drafted guys that are Hall of Famers, are going to be Hall of Famers. Troy Polamalu, Ben Roethlisberger, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward. I'm sure I'm missing a couple. You know, is that in the same category as finding those free agents or those late picks that you're going to celebrate it later? Or do you get a sense of pride of knowing that you had a part when they put on that gold jacket, you played a part in that?
Now you feel like you're a part of it, but in all honesty, it's to their credit. I mean, that they have to do so much. They have to be such great players, but great people and great workers, everything. And yeah, they did a lot more for us by playing than I did for them, or we did for them. We said, okay, we think this guy, we didn't say we think Troy can be a Hall of Famer. No, we just said, we think Troy's going to be a special player. Mm-hmm. But we never said that when we took him. So to me, the credit goes to that player and to his teammates, because they did that all together. And as you mentioned earlier, players help players become Hall of Famers. Coaches help them become Hall of Famers. Did we have a part in maybe getting a person a player in that may have helped him? I guess we did, but you really give it to that player because, again, when we drafted him, we never said he's a Hall of Fame.
You're going to be a Hall of Famer one day. Got that gold jacket on it. Come on, Kevin. You're not going to talk about it. Forget it. He's not going to talk about it. You're not going to talk about it.
What I will mention,
Okay, good.
Art Rooney Jr., who put together that great team in the 70s. I mean, Art's been nominated a few times, and he hasn't quite gotten there, but Art did a tremendous job. 4 and 6 has never been matched. 5 Hall of Famers in a draft. 4 draftees.
Plus Donnie Shell, yeah.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's what
And
Art,
Hall of Famers in earlier drafts. I mean, come on.
yeah, no, I mean, that era was special. And Art was, of course, Coach Noel was part of that. Ownership was part of that. But Art putting that together, Bill Nunn, who's in the Hall of Fame, was part of that. So that's a special era.
So when I listened to the Mike Tomlin press conference, my favorite part of the press conference every week is when he talks about the opponent's personnel. Oh man, I was at his pro day, and we scouted him, and I mean it feels like he's really into the scouting, and he's always down at the Senior Bowl, right? Matching guys up and out on the field. Seems like that part of it is something he really relishes.
It's amazing, his recall. I mean, it's really amazing because he'll see a guy, in the pregame that, we spent time with, and he'll say, hey, how's your mom? Is she still working at so-and-so? Or, you know what I mean? Hey, are you still here? And how's your kids? You good? But he can recall, first of all, he understands the information. He knows those players' backgrounds, not only from interviewing them, but he understands what they're telling him. You know what I mean? He understands the modern player without exception. And when he does the advanced work that he does prior to his weekly press conference, he's doing that work. It's not like, he gets advanced from the pro scouts, but Mike is watching that video himself. And Monday morning, I'll come in, he's already been there 2 or 3 hours, and he's watching. He don't care about the last game. That one's over. He's already watching the opponent, and he puts that together. But his recall on a player's personality is tremendous. We do alumni calls. We just had Coach and Omar on our last call, and he'd see we had a tight end, John Decker, who was on our practice squad and active here and there. And Deck was with us when Coach first got here. And Mike said, hey, Deck, how's it going? You still falling on the ground? Get up off the ground. Little stuff like that he could remember about John Decker. It's just amazing what Coach was able to pull back.
Would you have wanted a Hard Knocks to be done while you were?
No.
Yeah, I wondered. I honestly, so it's a fact.
Because those conversations.
It's private.
Those conversations, when you have to tell a young man, hey, we're releasing you.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any camera in there because that's hard for that young person to be told that, well, you're not quite, either you're not good enough for this level or you're not ready for this level. No. And I understand. I enjoyed watching it when they did it with the Penguins.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't know.
Right.
Yeah, I still wish they wouldn't even have. I understand the miking up of players. I understand they're in the locker room now all the time, and even in the NHL. And kind of not a fan. You're not really seeing anything different there. I'm just not a fan of. That's not really what's happening. Sometimes it's not really. There's a camera in there. It doesn't seem right. Some things still should be off limits, but I know they have to grow the game and trying to get other people involved in it. But I'm not surprised. I figured that's what you would say. Yeah.
Fortunately, we never had
to do it. I know.
I enjoy watching them though. I love the shows. I do enjoy the shows. By the way, U.S. Food will do whatever it takes to ensure that you reach your goals and your guests keep coming back. Go to usfoods.com. You worked with, we mentioned Don Shula, Wayne Fonts, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. At least 3 of those 4 are going to the Hall of Fame. 2 of them are obviously already in there. Is that one of the things you think back about in your career? Do you think about the collaborative effort with people? Do you think about Mr. Rooney? Do you think about all of it? The players, the success? It's been a lot.
No, I do. And I'll reflect on that, especially this time of year, the team just finished the draft and, you see the meetings and you remember what the meetings were like. But in a given meeting, it could have been Coach Collar. Obviously, it's Coach Tomlin. We mentioned Bill Nunn. Dick LeBeau sat in those meetings. Russ Grimm sat in those meetings. And we might be talking about Alan Faneca or Troy Polamalu. And oh, by the way, Mr. Dan Rooney would stick his head in or come in and be in the room for the draft. So, yeah, I was very fortunate to be around a lot of great coaches, players. As I mentioned, Danny in Miami, Barry Sanders in Detroit. I come here, Jerome Bettis is already here. I mean, there was a lot of great players that I've been able to be around and learn from, and great coaches for sure.
Your son Dan is in the family business, whatever you're going to call it, but obviously with the Steelers, amateur scout, heading up that department. What's your thoughts on seeing your son involved in that?
Now, I'm very proud of Dan. You know, Dan got his mother's size and my speed. Not a great combination. And Dan was a try-hard athlete. His best sport was basketball. And then he started off as an intern at Miami of Ohio, moved into the video. He was fortunate. He got an internship with the Steelers, which was great. But then the Steelers have a rule. I don't know if it's still in place, but you can't hire an intern unless there's an opening. You know, you can't create an opening for an intern because it defeats the purpose of having an intern program. But the year Dan was eligible, Joe Green retired. So the in-house joke was Dan replaced Joe Green. But he's done a nice job. He's made a name for himself, not only within the Steeler organizations, but I get compliments from people in the industry that I know to say, "Hey, your son does a great job when he's out on the road." And I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
So you're a consultant at Colorado State.
Yeah, we're in the consulting world right now. Oliver Luck, I'm sure you guys know Oliver, former WVU quarterback, NFL quarterback with the Oilers, AD, ran the World League for a while. Oliver reached out to me back in September and said, "Hey, these colleges with this pending NIL rev share salary cap, they're going to need some help. Would you be interested?" I said, "Sure." So we presented to a group of ADs back in September. We met with about 15 or 20 of them. A lot of them are doing their own thing right now. Colorado State was one that said, "Hey, we'd like to get the help." So it's fun. It's a whole new challenging endeavor that's coming through the college sports world right now as we speak.
And they went from 0 to, now they're giving the farm away. I mean, the money, think about all as athletes playing. If you had a scholarship, you felt like that was that was a win. And now it's
players are taking a pay cut to come to the NFL.
At some positions, they literally are. And you know what? Good for the player.
Yep.
It's great because they've been part of those universities' sports programs' success.
Mm-hmm.
And most of those sports programs are very lucrative. So why shouldn't the player be part of it? The problem is that we have to find a way to sustain it so that it can be sustained and everybody can share in it. And again, as this comes into being and grows, I think it will become more workable. But right now, even the transfer rules are a little bit lenient.
Kind of the Wild West a little bit.
It is because, you can sign a guy to a 3-year NIL, but he can hit the portal and the NIL is null and void because he can just leave. So there's a lot that has to be tightened up, cleaned up, just not to take any money away from the player, but to make sure that it's sustainable for sport and the player.
Kevin, it's been fabulous having you on here. There's so much great perspective on what is soon to be a Hall of Fame career. Well, it's been a Hall of Fame career, but soon to be acknowledged as one. I don't even want to talk about that. But thanks so much. Thanks for your insight, and it's just been wonderful having you on.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Kevin Colbert, our guest. Our thanks to One Team Media for shooting all this stuff for us, to Brad Dressen in the North Park Lounge, and to you for watching. Kevin Colbert, our guest.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for being with us for Offset. with Kinger and the big man.